Hey everyone, I'm Kim and welcome to Crime Stats Daily. This is a channel where we go beyond the headlines to examine the facts, the statistics, and the stories behind crime in America. Our goal is simple: to separate myth from reality using reliable data and credible research. If you enjoy fact-based crime analysis, please subscribe and join me here each week as we delve into the numbers. Now let's get started. Today, we're digging into the crime stats of Chicago. Can we trust the crime statistics out of Chicago? This is an ongoing series where we're covering major cities and their crime statistics. And for Chicago, we're going to look all the way back to 2021 through 2025 to examine the numbers. Now, we're going to walk through the big categories. We'll look at the year-to-year changes. We'll talk about the seasonal patterns that show up every year, and we'll compare Chicago to the rest of the country and also talk honestly about the limits of these numbers, including some older cases where deaths weren't counted the way you might expect. So let's start with a number that gets the most attention, and that is homicides. Now, in 2021, Chicago recorded 805 homicides. 2022 dropped to 719. 2023 was 623, and 2024 came in at 587, and 2025 finished at 416. So what are our takeaways when we look at these numbers? Well, that's a 29% drop from 2024 to 2025 and almost a 48% decline from the 2021 peak. Now, multiple sources, including the police department and independent analysis, say that the 416 is the lowest annual total since 1965. The rate in 2025 was roughly 14.6 per 100,000 people. The Chicago PD also reported clearing about 71% of those 2025 cases, so about 296 clearances altogether. Now let's look at Chicago's seasonal pattern. One thing that never really changes is a seasonal pattern in crime for the most part. Homicides in Chicago are heavily concentrated in the warmer months. Most of them happen between May and September, and a big share occur late at night into the early morning hours. Winter months are almost always the lowest. Even in a year like 2025, when the overall total fell hard, December still came in low at 24 homicides, down from 41 the December before. Now, shootings themselves followed a very similar trend. Shooting incidents dropped from 2,274 in 2024 to 1,471 in 2025. That's a 35% decline. Shooting victims went from 2,797 down to 1,848. So that's about a 34% drop. Now, looking further back, 2023 had 2,453 incidents, and 2022 had 2,831. The University of Chicago Crime Lab's mid-December numbers showed roughly 3,180 fewer shooting victims compared with the same stretch the year before. And the decline showed up in more than 85% of the police districts. So same seasonal story here: summer peaks, winter lows, even while the yearly totals were falling. Now, the other violent categories we need to look at, let's take a look at robberies. Robbery is one of the bigger movers. CompStat shows 5,827 robberies in 2025, and that was down from 9,116 in 2024, and way down from the recent peak of 11,051 in 2023. So that's a 36% drop from the prior year and almost a 47% drop from the high point. Firearm robberies were down about 45%. Now let's look further at violent crime. Aggravated battery came in at 5,754 in 2025 versus 6,512 the year before, roughly a 12% decline. Criminal assault stayed pretty flat at 1,764 in 2025. 1,790 in 2024 and 1,884 in 2023. So overall, the department reported violent crime down somewhere in the 21 to 23% range for the year. Now, the vehicular hijackings and multi-victim shootings also posted big double-digit drops. Now, let's look at motor vehicle theft. On the property side, motor vehicle theft had that big post 2021 surge and then the pullback. 2025 finished at 17,129 cases. 2024 was 21,713, and 2023 was the high at 29,255. So that's a 21% drop from 2024 and a 40% drop from the peak. Now, burglary itself fell from 7,654 to 6,130. So about a 20% drop. Felony theft was down about 10%. Misdemeanor theft down about 3%. And when you look at the broader data portal numbers for 2025, there were roughly 236,660 reported crimes citywide. Theft was the biggest single category at around 55,000, followed by battery, criminal damage, assault, and motor vehicle theft. About 37,800 of those incidents had an arrest attached, and around 45,000 were flagged as domestic related. You'll still see the usual summer bump in a lot of these property categories too. People are out more, cars are left out on the street longer, that kind of thing, even in years when the annual totals are falling. So how does this stack up nationally? So let's look at Chicago compared to the national numbers. The whole country saw a big jump in homicides in 2020 and 2021. Nationally, the increase from 2018 to 2021 was around 38% in some analysis. Chicago's increase over a similar period was steeper, closer to 56%. And after that peak, the U.S. has seen consecutive yearly declines. One recent summary put the national drop from 2024 to 2025 in the 19 to 20% range. Chicago's 29% drop was larger in percentage terms, even though its actual rate is still higher than a lot of its peer cities. Now let's look at Chicago in context. 2025 rates were roughly 3.4 per 100,000 in New York, about 7.7 in Los Angeles, and around 13.3 in Philadelphia and 14.6 in Chicago. So Chicago's percentage improvement was strong, but the starting point was higher. Violent crime overall was down roughly 9% nationally in some of the preliminary numbers, while Chicago's reported violent crime drop was in the low to mid-20s. Property crime nationally also turned downward after the post-pandemic increases, which lines up with what we saw in Chicago's auto theft and burglary numbers. Now, the part that a lot of people ask about, how solid are these numbers really? And those are always my questions. Now, these figures come from crimes that were reported to police and then recorded in the system. They are not a complete count of everything that happens. Plenty of property crime, simple assaults, and some sexual assaults never get reported at all. And that's true in every big city. Now let's look at classification. And this is a big issue in some of our major cities. Chicago has had a documented history with classification decisions, especially in the early to mid 2010s. A 2014 investigative series in Chicago Magazine by David Bernstein and Noah Eikenson looked at several cases where deaths that looked like homicides or were even ruled homicides by the medical examiner were later moved into a non-criminal or death investigation categories, so they didn't count in the official murder numbers or totals. A few of the specific examples they highlighted: one is Tierra Groves in 2013. The medical examiner ruled it a homicide by unspecified means, but a lieutenant later reclassified the investigation as non-criminal. Jacob Kalapsky, I'm sorry I'm butchering the name, was a case in 2014. The case started in a non-criminal death category. Patrick Walker is another case that was moved into a non-homicide death investigation category. So those were part of a broader pattern that the reporting described at the time. Later reviews of missing persons data have also found instances where cases later tied to homicides had been closed as non-criminal in the police records. Now, homicide is still the most reliably counted serious crime because there's a body and the medical examiner is involved. Big systematic undercounting of confirmed murders is harder now with open data and more outside scrutiny. But those older examples are a useful reminder that classification choices can affect the official totals. Now, when we're talking about the big drops from 2021 to 2025, we are talking about the official reported numbers. They're the best public data that we have, and the trends are clear. They just aren't a perfect one-to-one with every single incident that occurred. And that's the 5-year picture: multi-year declines in the most serious categories, a multi-decade low in homicides, the same summer peaks and winter valleys that we always see, percentage drops that often outpace the national average, and a documented history of classification issues worth keeping in mind. Now, if you've watched our New York City episode, you've probably noticed a common theme. Crime statistics are one of the most valuable tools we have for understanding crime trends, but they only tell part of the story. And at Crime Stats Daily, our commitment is simple. We don't chase headlines, we examine statistics. We verify data using publicly available records whenever possible. We acknowledge the strength of the evidence, we recognize its limitation, and we provide the context needed to understand what the numbers really mean. If new evidence becomes available, or if official agencies revive previously reported information, we'll update our reporting accordingly. Next week, we're going to cover the stats for Los Angeles. If you found this episode useful, please hit the like, subscribe, and turn on the notifications so you don't miss the next episode. Drop a comment below on your thoughts about this episode. I would love to hear from you. I'm Kim. This is Crime Stats Daily. Stay informed, stay aware, and stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.